Are you the kind of partner who gives everything? You're kind, you're supportive, you're always there. And the challenge that you have right now is that it seems that being nice is only met with your partner pulling away. And this is typical of anxious avoidant dynamic. When you're being nice, you send some kind of signals, unconscious signals, to your avoidant partner who will in result pull away. I used to be dismissive avoidant and I used to react this way. And in this video, I'm going to share with you what's going on in your mind when you do this. And also some practical things you can implement, not to change who you are, but to change the dynamic of the relationship. Because yes, being nice can be triggering if you're too nice with an avoidant, and I'll explain everything after the jingle. So why being too nice can backfire? The thing is, this idea of warmth, of being there, it could be seen, there's nothing wrong with that, by the way, but it could be seen as overwhelming, right? You're sort of imposing something on me, right? Look at it as some kind of territory, right? When you're being warm, when you're being caring, you're in a way invading my space. Again, there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm just explaining how we could perceive things. When you connect, when you invade my territory, I lose my sense of autonomy, right? And I remember thinking this back when I was 20. This idea of I don't want her to depend on me. And I don't want me to depend on her. The thing is, when you're being too nice, of course, there's an expectation, because it's very hard to be nice without expecting anything in return, let's be honest. When you're being nice, of course you want something in return. And they know it, they feel it. And the problem is that they feel pressure that they need to respond. And they don't know how to respond. And they don't feel comfortable in responding to those emotional beats. And this is why sometimes it triggers this withdrawal, this emotional shutdown, right? This is too much. I don't speak that language. I can't reciprocate. And therefore, my coping mechanism as an avoidant is to pull away. So just one thing about avoidant, we were taught at a young age to be autonomous, not to rely on anyone. And our most common coping mechanism is to disappear, is to pull away. So whenever I'm stressed, I get into an argument with my wife, my immediate inner child reaction or response would be to pull away, to disappear. My wife, who's more leaning toward anxious, would be on the attack. Okay? I'm saying this because it doesn't matter if I'm avoidant or if she's anxious. The point is to understand how we function and find ways to overcome those unconscious patterns. Right? That's what I do with my clients, and that's what I want you to learn watching my videos. So that's why these insights, those learnings about attachment, about who you are in the relationship, your role in the relationship, it's for you to finally work on those unconscious patterns that you carried along with you most of your life. It's important to understand the origin story of your partner. So if he or she's avoidant, usually it's because in their childhood, as I discussed, is this idea of autonomy. And this autonomy is usually the result of a rejection. It's not about abuse or neglect. It's really, as children, we need emotional support from our parent. And so we make attempts to connect with our parents. Whether those needs are met or not depends on the parent and on their availability. For instance, I have amazing parents, super loving, but they were not available when I was young. They were working super hard. I only had nannies, and I guess it was hard for me to get the affection, the attention that I needed. And of course, when you have 2 children, 3 children, they react differently, right? So the thing is, you are taught at a very young age, you can't rely on this person, you can't get this sort of affection, attention. Therefore, you have to deal it with yourself. And so you are taught to suppress this need. Right? I shouldn't have this need. I shouldn't feel the need to hug my mom or my dad, right? Because I know they can't give it to me. So I need to self-soothe, right? So it's our ability to self-soothe that determined or that sort of created our personality when it comes to not the entire personality, but the dynamic of how we behave in a relationship. Because the way we behave with our primary attachment figure, i.e. our parents or caregivers, will be exactly the same as how we behave with our wife, husband. So we switch from attachment figure parents to attachment figure our romantic partners. And so that's why this idea of intellectually valuing independence. Independence is way more important than emotional intimacy. And in a way, for me, it took me a lot of time to realize the importance and the value of emotional intimacy, right? So whenever you get too close, whenever you're kind of the perfect emotional person, it's very hard for them to understand that actually that's kind of nice. Actually, that's what will make us feel more connected. Okay, so there's a clash between their belief system around emotion is difficult, emotion is dangerous, because I will not get my needs met. Understand that we all have a deep need to be attached to our primary attachment figure. Avoidance, what they're doing is they're blocking this need. So they have this need within themselves, but what they're doing is that they're shutting down this need. So a quick one about my childhood. As I said, very busy parents, very loving at the same time. And I was very difficult when I was 4, 5, 6. Very, very difficult because I really wanted to have my father's attention, my mother's attention. And, they were super stressed. They didn't want to deal with that. Positive education was not a big thing at that time. And so I would have go into your bedroom, do your thing, or indifference. I wouldn't actually hear from them. When you're a little kid and you try to test the boundaries, you just want to, it's one way to connect with your parents. And so the narrative that I created within myself, if I can't connect with them, right? Of course, when you're 5 or 6, you don't know how to connect. You try things and you see how people react. And so you create that narrative, that storyline. If I do this, this will happen. So if I don't do this, I have to make it happen myself. Also, another element that goes hand in hand with this is this idea, and which is very typical for French people, by the way, of raising your kids to be very autonomous very early on. And so you would be praised of, oh, well done, you can go to the bakery on your own. Well done for having done this on your own, right? When you're a parent, it's very difficult to manage teaching your kids to be autonomous, while at the same time they know they can rely on you. It depends on kids, depends on the character. My eldest, for example, loves to be autonomous. And if he could wave at us, 1 kilometer, 1 mile away from the school, he'll be super happy. He hates us bringing him to the gate. My youngest is very different. He's more clingy. He would hug me. He would hug us because he feels, being autonomous, I'm not ready. So it really depends. And it's very hard as a parent, being a father of 2. It's very hard to find the right balance. But this is also important if you have kids, of how you can manage this element of autonomy and emotional connection. And so this idea of nice can be smothering. For me, I always had this bad image. Sometimes I mention this. When I was young, I would not being a super fan of Superman or Batman, but more the bad guys. Because usually Superman, Batman, their weak spot is because they're in love, right? They're in love with Catwoman, they're in love with Lois Lane or whatever. If it was not for her, they would always win, basically. So that's kind of, I think it's an interesting story. I don't know, maybe it's not. But just to give you this idea of this reassurance, this emotional pressure is a weakness. And it's also this element of, I don't speak that language. So when you want to hug me, I don't hug people, for example. I hug people, but it's like the idea of people that are not really into hugs is because they have never thought how to hug, how to hold hands, how to, to be physically connected with their parents. So how come they be physically connected with their partner? So there's this element of emotional being negative Batman, Superman, this element of, the language. And also it's this idea of if they give a lot, there's this kind of imbalance. It means that they need more than I need them, right? And it's somehow comfortable for avoidant. I prefer that they need more than I need you. But it's just like finding the right balance, because if you feel that they are too much into me, they are too invested, then you lose the appeal and you lose this element in a way of chemistry and seduction. So what works with avoidant? With avoidant, subtle, gentle communication, obviously, that's a must-have. But also, what I find works best, and that was the case for me, is being able to explain how you work, how you function. Not only your side of the story, but the narrative, the stories you're telling yourself. Why you feel in a certain way when they pull away. Why you feel in a certain way when they don't connect. If your partner has feelings, cares for you, has a little bit of empathy, they would be interested in understanding how you function. I call this principle pragmatic empathy. It's this idea of understanding more about yourself so you can understand your partner and therefore speak the same language. So as I said before, it's often a perception of like, we can't speak the same language, this emotional language. Also, you have to understand that their need for space is not rejection. So when you don't know about attachment style and you feel like, okay, we had a great date, we spent great time together, even we are living together, but somehow they feel the need to disappear. So I feel that they need to disappear from me, away from me. No, that's not about that. It's just like that's their way of being on their own, finding the space to recharge. Anxious people, they would recharge by connecting. Avoidant people, they would recharge by being on their own, in their own world. Your role, if you're trying to get back with them, if you're trying to reconnect, to reconcile, to make it work, is to be the role model in that story. You're the one watching the video, you're the one learning about attachment, you're the one trying to figure out how to improve this relationship, so be the role model. Maybe that won't work because your partner is so far, is not interested in working on things, but regardless of the outcome, your responsibility is to do the work. Your responsibility is to think of yourself, okay, in 6 months' time, I look back and I will be proud of what I've done. Because I would look back and I would be, okay, I was the one self-aware. I was the one doing the work, trying to make it work, to improve the relationship, to grow as a couple. And if it doesn't work, it's not because of me, right? It's because they lack emotional connection. They lack empathy. Maybe we just disconnected and sometimes that happens. But regardless of this outcome, you would have done the work. So some common strategies around communications. The thing is, very often people want to address things when they fight, when they argue. You see, that's not the best way to deal with disagreements in a relationship. What you need to do is you can apply it at work with your employees, with your kids. 5 positive, 5 praises for 1 negative. 1 constructive feedback, 5 positive ones. We tend to do the other way around. And if you're French, it's more like 1 positive for 20 negatives. Using guilt, using emotional manipulation will backfire, right? Because they will see like, hold on, you're trying to manipulate. Anything that would be perceived as manipulation, again, remember this idea of territory. You're invading my territory. You're trying to make me do something. Right? And I value independence. I want to feel in control. I want to feel I make my own decisions. So if you're the one trying to make me do something, I'm going to actually be triggered, withdrawing, and actually push you back. Even worse. Also, actions, consistency work best than words. Words, they are nice to have, they are not must have. Again, this idea of role model. So, for example, physical affection, nice words, but also quality time. So that's one of the love languages, quality time. This idea of doing things together. Avoidants, they respond way better in you spending time with them, doing things, an activity together, than talking for hours on a coffee date or on the phone. Also be proactive. You know that they're avoidant, that they lean towards being avoidant. So actually be the one, okay, you want some time off? You want to go on a weekend with your mates or whatever? Rather than creating a sense of, okay, I don't know exactly, I don't want you to, but I know you need to go on weekends every now and then because you need to, etc. Oh, okay. What I see again is it's based on this idea of pragmatic empathy. You know that your partner, let's put it this way. If you want to be successful in a relationship, it's very simple. You just have to need to meet your partner's needs. That's it. What are your avoidance needs? Need for space, need for autonomy. So of course, you can't be avoidant 100% of the time if you're in a relationship, right? Because you can't be autonomous, independent if you're in a relationship. So it's finding ways for them to nurture this sense of autonomy, this sense of independence in the context of the relationship. So it could be, again, days out when they're with friends or on their own, time out when, I don't know, sometimes they like to play video games or just be on their own. It's not because they don't want to be with you, it's just like they need this, right? So again, it's always a clash of an understanding about their needs. Yes, when they go and play video games, it's not as nice as connecting and being there for each other. But if that's what they need, they also need to understand, and that's why you need to be the role model, the impact of their actions. And that's why it's important to be able to express also your world and expose whether once you explain exactly how you function, who you are as a person, and very simply, that's why I think attachment theory is amazing in the sense that it's very simple to explain. It's very simple to map out most of the dynamic in a relationship. And once you have conversation on that, it's not anymore you versus me. It's more of like, oh, okay, I understand why you need this. And we're back to meeting your partner's need. So the way to build this over time is to get to those talks about attachment, about your own work. It's about also consistency. You're here, but they know, again, this idea of letting them feel in control. One way you can also help them to be more secure is this idea of co-regulation. So, as I said, one of the things you're taught when you're a kid and you become avoidant, you end up being avoidant, is this idea of self-soothing, which feels like a superpower, right? I don't need anyone. If I'm sad, I will be able to self-regulate myself. The problem is that obviously you're missing out on the beauty of what makes a good relationship. So it's about like teaching them every now and then, gradually, the value of connection. It's not about being their therapist or healing their wounds. They also need to do some kind of work on their own, but for them to rearrange the story, rearrange the narrative, and realize that actually connecting doesn't have to be as dangerous. Connecting wouldn't be met with rejection, with judgment. Obviously, boundaries are a very, very important part. It really helps you to also draw the line around the things that you don't want. So I said about like, you need to meet your partner's needs. That's why if you're trying to reconcile, to repair a relationship with an avoidant and you have an anxious attachment style, the work that I do with my clients is like, okay, let's try to figure out your needs first. Okay, let's try to see what's important, the non-negotiables. And then we assess whether this person that you love and where you're kind of projecting an idealized relationship, is he or is she actually able to meet those needs? When you present those needs without any form of pressure, but like when you do it, and it's always about the how you do it. When you do it, are they on board or just pushing away? No, that's not who I am. That's not what I want. This is your answer. right? Because sometimes people waste time trying to reconcile with an ex for 6 months, always ending up where they started. You need to remove, this is very important, you need to reframe this idea of it will work, or the quality of a relationship is a correlation of how much I invest in the relationship. No. The reason you have a challenge with this partner is not because you're not nice enough, it's because you're too nice. Being an accommodating wife or husband is not helping the relationship. And in a way, this is where you really need to challenge the way you do things. Because when you're dealing with an avoidant, it will backfire. But even if you're dealing with someone secure, you're creating the condition of you to be unhappy, to be in a relationship that's not working for you. And a lot of people who have an anxious attachment style, who forget about themselves, they end up in unsatisfied relationship because they forgot something very fundamental in this relationship is themselves. So boundaries, very important, and that's why the work is really about creating that secure base. You have insecurities, and it's fine. It's not the end of the world. That don't define you. Create that secure base. Expose yourself with your partner. Assess whether it's the right relationship, whether this person, this partner can actually be the partner that will help you to grow in this relationship. So being an avoidant is not the end of the world. I used to be dismissive avoidant. Of course, with my trainings and experience, I developed a secure attachment. And even every now and then I feel avoidant, right? As I said, sometimes when I have an argument or when I'm stressed, my default, my coping mechanism would be to pull away, to isolate myself. It's something that can easily be worked on, whether you have an anxious attachment style or an avoidant attachment style. Look at everywhere online. It's, in a way, fairly straightforward to work on yourself. Self-awareness is the starting point. That's what you're doing here right now. It's watching videos, learning about attachment style, developing this sense of safety, this sense of security. Your role in the relationship is to teach them, be the role model when it comes to emotional connection. In a way, raise their emotional intelligence, emotional IQ or EQ. It takes a bit of time. It takes a bit of patience. It takes a bit of consistency. That doesn't mean that you should accept being in that process forever. That's why every time I work with clients, it's time bounded. Not because I don't want to work with clients forever, but it's because my view is that you shouldn't waste time, if this partner is not willing to do the work. So yes, there's an element of timing, and it's about creating that secure base. It's about navigating things with him or her, and it takes a few weeks, sometimes a few months. But the point is, throughout the process, listen to yourself. What are your needs? What are the non-negotiables? Right? If you are that secure person, sometimes the difference between someone secure and someone who has an anxious attachment style is that this secure person will not date your partner, your ex. I'm not saying you should move away, and most of my clients, they get back together after a breakup. That's the point. But it's just for you to understand, listen to yourself. That's the most important thing. Build that secure attachment, build that secure base, and then you assess. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section. I always forget to say it, but if you want to support my work and want this content to be spread across YouTube a little bit more than it is right now, don't forget to subscribe and like. I'll see you next time. Take care.